Today let's put some demons in our Chaos Marines and talk about the brutal melee power of the Possessed squad. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Chaos once more, and I thought we'd take a look at one of the strongest units of the book, the Chaos Possessed squad that's going to be getting some new models in the near future, and with a big increase in their size and raw chunkiness on the table, they're also getting faster, tougher, and more dangerous in melee. We'll talk over their datasheet and damage output, a few of the buffs and synergies that you can put on them, and a couple of ideas for unit builds and using them in game. Lots of demonic infused goodness to talk about, so let's jump straight into it. So first up, Chaos Possessed are a Chaos Space Marines elite choice, 5 to 10 Marines for 28 points per model. They cost a fair bit more than they did before, but I feel that their profile has them looking all around strong. Keywords wise, they're Demon and Demonkin Infantry. They get the Legion tag, Heretic and Traitor as Astartes, though notably they are missing Core, which does lock them out of getting quite a few options. It means that the way that the new mark system works, you can't actually mark Possessed with a mark of the different gods, which does seem a bit of a shame to me, as they seem like one of the units that would most obviously have marks. They have bonded themselves to some flavour of demons after all. I guess maybe they thought that the marks would combine to make them a bit too powerful overall. In general, not having core does mean that they don't really work with a fair few of the character buffs in the book, but the ones that do help them generally go a very long way, particularly that Master of Possession. In any case, their stat line is beefy. They've got a 9-inch movement now, so they're hurtling up the board pretty quickly for infantry. They hit on 3s, have strength and toughness 5, 3 wounds, a big 5 attacks, leadership 9, a 3+ save and a 5+ invul, though often they won't even need the 5+ invul unless they're getting hit by AP -4 or better, thanks to Armour of Contempt allowing them to shrug off quite a bit. I quite like the way that they've got a Possessed champion as well, 6 attacks on him, so one of them's punching extra hard until the entire squad goes down. They generally want to be hurtling up the board to get into combat, and when they do get there, they strike at the strength user, AP -2 and damage 2 for a big 5 attacks each. For the points cost, I think that's at least fairly impressive, and there's lots of ways that they can make that a lot more dangerous. It is fairly general purpose as well, enough AP to count at least somewhat against most heavily armoured things, and a couple of damage will be really punishing to any multi-wound infantry or any vehicles without a -1 damage baked in. Then from there, they've of course got Armour of Contempt from the balanced data slate, but they also get Let the Galaxy Burn, so exploding 6s from turn 3 onwards if you go into wanton slaughter. Like a few of the big scary units, they've got the Fearsome rule, a 6-inch aura of -1 leadership, and the only war gear option on the datasheet that they can take is an icon for 5 points. That's +1 to their own combat attrition, and it doesn't give any god-specific buff sadly, even for the armies that can get the appropriate keyword, as again not being core means they can't actually take the marks of said gods. For that reason, I think the icon isn't really all that great. I guess you might be running big enough squads that they might actually be failing morale from time to time. At 5 points, if it ever does save a model, then that will be points well spent, but I think it's going to come up quite rarely. It's kind of a bit take or leave in my opinion. I think most people would typically just leave it off. Overall though, they seem like really quite a good Chaos Battle Line unit. 9-inch movement will get them where they need to go very quickly. They'll be scrapping over the centre of the board with enemy infantry, and they both have enough damage and enough defence to be able to go toe-to-toe with most enemy choices. Just for an idea of their raw damage output, at a base squad of 5 models for 140 points, you'd be getting a mighty 26 attacks at strength 5 AP 2 damage 2, that'd be 12 dead guardsmen, around about 6 dead 2 wound space marines even with Armour of Contempt, or around 8 wounds to a toughness 7 or 8 vehicle with a 3+ save. For the points cost, that's really not too bad. As you might expect for damage 2 weapons with some AP, they're going to be excellent at beating up space marines and other 2 wound infantry. If you're taking 10 men in the squad, then of course you'd just double those average numbers. I think if you'd want to be threatening the enemy's hardiest and hardest hitting units, or you want to take out things like tanks and vehicles, then you typically want to go for that. But a cheaper unit will still be getting around the board very quickly and smashing up small units of enemy elites or light infantry. Of course, the numbers can get a lot more impressive with a few basic buffs, as we'll go on to now. So let's go through the buffing options for the Possessed then. First up, as we mentioned, they can't take marks, though both the Emperor's Children and the World Eaters can pick up their god keywords, as basically everything in the army gets that. It means that you can target them with some Slanesh-specific or Khorne-specific buffs, which is quite a powerful option for those armies. In particular, the Slanesh keyword Possessed are really quite nice as a target for delightful agonies, That's their 5+ Feel No Pain spell. Always a pretty nice thing to have if you've got lots of wounds on the unit. Next up, as they do have a champion, they can take relics within the squad. A lot of the options replace specific bits of war gear, so the possessed wouldn't be able to take those. But I think far more useful than virtually anything else on the list anyway is the Black Rune of Damnation, which they can take. That's the one that gives the entire unit a -1 to wounds. A big unit of 10 possessed seems like an excellent choice for putting that on. Toughness 5 and -1 to wound means things like Strength 4 will be wounding them on 6s, which is going to be nowhere near efficient in terms of damage. And even big things like Strength 8 or something, that's only going to be wounding them on 4s. Basically, I think the Black Rune of Damnation is kind of auto-include somewhere in the Chaos list, whether you put it on Possessed or maybe Terminators. Otherwise, if you want to buff these, the near auto-include choice is a Master of Possession, I think. A lot of the other character buffs can't target the Possessed as they aren't core, but the Master of Possession's psychic powers can, and what's more, they're pretty much all really good. First up, you've got Warp Marks to target an enemy unit to be +1 to wound, and that can be something that your Possessed were just about to charge. Excellent on mid-strength attacks like Strength 5. Pact of Flesh is again almost auto-include somewhere in the army. Resurrecting a slain model and healing an injured one is excellent value every time you cast, plus you can set up the possessed model at the front of the unit to make their charges shorter. Cursed Earth is an amazing defensive one, gives you a 4+ invul, so you're going to be saving even AP3 on a 4+, and it also means that enemies have the chance of taking some mortal wounds when they charge your squad, which can be kind of annoying for ruining their damage output. Then Infernal Power can give them 6s to hit auto wound, doesn't hurt when they're punching up against something with high toughness, and Mutated Invigoration, likely 4+1 toughness to toughness 6, though if you're just about to be going into toughness 5 targets then the +1 strength might be better, and if you luck out and cast on a 10+, then you get both. The extra toughness could be very nice indeed if you did take the Black Rune of Damnation. Overall, I think that literally any of those are decent enough to warrant inclusion. I'd say perhaps the defensive ones, Pact of Flesh and Cursed Earth, they seem like some of the nicest options. I think, to be honest, if you were running multiple big squads of Possess, you could probably justify multiple Masters of Possession to have more of these in play, and potentially stack both the damage and defensive buffs onto the squad that's going to make it into the most important combat. Otherwise, if you did happen to have Dark Hereticus powers lying around, either from a regular sorcerer or a squad psycho with the Balefire Tome, you could throw Prescience on the unit for +1 to hit. That's rarely going to be bad on such a general purpose dangerous squad. For transports, I suppose you could pick up a Land Raider, though I think it's a bit redundant, particularly on Possessed with their own decent speed. For the cost of a Land Raider, you could be picking up the best part of an entire extra squad of Possessed if you wanted. I feel it's perhaps a little bit of a better choice on squads that move a bit slower. Maybe units like Chosen might be one of the best ways of getting more value out of it. Stratagems-wise, they don't have a ton in the main book, though have a fair few interesting options out of the Legions. Perhaps the most obvious tempting one is 2 command points for Veterans of the Long War for +1 to wound. As with Warp Marked, if you're wounding things with a toughness 8 on a 4+ rather than a 5, that's an extra 50% damage, and on such a big squad that's really massive. If you happen to be fighting the Loyalists as well, 1 command point for Death to the False Emperor can give you reroll hits against Space Marines, and they're not too uncommon a foe. If we talk through the Legions, I think some of them make Possess even more interesting, particularly the Word Bearers, and I think you would have expected it given how much they like summoning the demons. Their Legion trait is really strong for anything melee, reroll hits on the first round of combat, and a 5+ save against mortal wounds. That's a really big damage boost to the vast majority of their fights, and on top of that they've got a bunch of helpful stuff such as the Master of the Union Warlord trait, which will give you +1 strength and an extra AP -1 for 1 unit. That's a command phase buff that you could easily put on a Master of Possession. Those attacks are going to be a lot scarier at strength 6 and AP3. For 2 CP as well, you can use Revered Hosts. This allows you to reroll wound rolls in melee. If you do need every single ounce of strength out of the squad and you're not already going to kill your target, that could easily be a better choice than Veterans of the Long War. It does help them get around things like transhuman physiology as well. And I guess you could in theory use the Balefire icon to help protect your unit from enemy rerolls. Again, that's very easily something that you could put on a Master of Possession that's supporting the squad moving up. It basically prevents the opponent from rerolling hits, wounds, or damage against your units. In general, Possessed and Word Bearers are going to do pretty well. Otherwise, for Black Legion, +1 to hit on the charge is no bad thing, and 2 CP for Tip of the Spear could get them extra AP and more charge reliability. Night Lords might quite like them for the extra -1 leadership that they bring, That stacks with their own ability and means that they should be +1 to wound on anything with leadership 8 or lower. Good for the targets that do have that, but not everything will. They can also pick up -1 to hit for 1 command point, or 2 command points 1 for not falling back. Both of those could have really good value depending on what's shooting you or is in combat with you. Iron Warriors means there's no rerolls against the unit as they're moving up, not a bad defensive thing in general, and they've got that nice -1 damage stratagem. Both of those will keep them a little bit more alive as they move up, though quite a few of the Iron Warriors synergies do tend to be with ranged things. Alpha Legion have a -1 to hit at long range, they get to redeploy via a Warlord trait, which is quite nice, and they also have that stratagem for pre-game moving as well. That's really quite threatening when you could get a big block of these 9 inches into the board. I think Emperor's Children might be another one of the most interesting legions for Possessed. Their base benefits are okay, ignoring weapon skill modifiers, and 6s to wound cause extra AP in combat as well, not too bad on AP -2 against things like Armour of Contempt. But perhaps I think they're more interesting because they get the Slanesh keyword, which means they can use Delightful Agonies and gives them access to a few other options. Plus, on top of all the support they can get from things like Masters of Possession for damage and defense, they've got a whole load of useful things just from the Emperor's Children, though they might be a little bit CP hungry. For 1 command point, they can get a d6 plus 6 inch charge, not bad when you've already got 9 inch movement to start with. For 2 CP, you could pick up extra AP. For 1 command point, you could be put in Wanton Slaughter for the exploding 6s to hit. They can get Heroic Intervention for 1 command point, which is quite nice if they park themselves on an objective, and 2 command points to fight in death if they are charged by something extra nasty. Lots of really good options there, but all costing CP does mean that you'd have to pick and choose quite a bit. Next up, World Eaters from their White Dwarf supplement get their extra attack on the charge, 1 command point to pre-game move, which again will be great for throwing them into the midfield for charges later, and they have a stratagem for 1 command point for extra AP as well, which again will be very relevant on anything with very high saves like Terminators. They also get the Corn keyword as well here, which could be handy too. I do feel with their extra speed and toughness they might actually be giving the genuine World Eaters Berserkers a bit of a run for their money. Having damage 2 on all of those mass attacks is really nice. Creations of Mile might not have quite as much support as some of the others, but I think that their chapter tactic works better for Possessed than virtually most of the other things. They get an extra pip of movement, so a huge 10-inch movement there, that's genuinely quite scary. An extra pip of strength means that they'll be striking at strength 6, great for tangling with custodians and the like. Fights in death means that they're really problematic to try and shift in melee, and they also have an advance and charge stratagem as well, adding even more charge threat range to the unit. With that stratagem and their extra pip of movement, they'd be averaging a charge on something like 20 to 21 inches, so they can easily be clearing a very good chunk of the board to get them in combat. Finally, we have the Red Corsairs. They just get advance and charge all the time, and extra boosts to objectives, counting as more than 1 model. Really quite nice delivery for just hurtling them up into combat. Huge amounts of extra combat damage don't really matter all that much if you can't get it to where it's going to be meaningful. Out of these, I think that quite a few legions do have good uses for them. I'd say maybe the standouts are perhaps the Word Bearers, Emperor's Children, Creations of Bile, and perhaps even the World Eaters as well with their pre-game moving. Just to put some combos together a little bit, first up here's a Word Bearers build, 10 Possessed for 280 points, and a Master of Possession for 105 points. For the Master of Possession, I've gone for Pact of Flesh for the healing and Warp Marks for the +1 to wound against their chosen charge target, and he's also got the Master of the Union trait for +1 strength and an extra AP. Realistically, you're probably going to lose at least a few of them getting shot up on the way into combat, but if they did manage to survive intact to make a charge, that would theoretically be 51 attacks at strength 6, AP 3, damage 2, or with a +1 to wounds due to warp marks, and re-rolling hits with the Word Bearer's Legion trait. That would average 38 dead guardsmen, 25 dead space marines, 38 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle, and even against a -1 damage target, say with toughness 8 and a 5+ invul, that'd still be a huge 15 wounds. Hugely scary stuff, that'd delete the vast majority of units that they're going to be able to get into. And even if the squad had taken a whole bunch of casualties, you could potentially turn up the heat even more with their 2 command point stratagem to reroll wound rolls. Between that and warp marked, you'd still be wounding things like toughness 8 vehicles 3 out of 4 times. Very scary, and for raw damage alone, I think you'd find Word Bearers hard to beat. Otherwise, for a bit more of a tanky build, here's an Emperor's Children 10 Possessed at 280 points, a Master of Possession with a relic that allows him to cast extra, and he will be 130 points as he'd be upgraded with the Mark of Slanesh. Each turn he could cast Pact of Flesh, Cursed Earth for a 4+ Invul, and a 5+ Feel No Pain onto the units. They're just going to be monstrously hard to take down, regenerate models and wounds every turn. And if you were really going the whole hog, you could have the Black Rune of Damnation on them for the -1 to wounds. Even with massively focused enemy fire, you might struggle to get through any meaningful amount of the unit, and they still absolutely wreck most things in combat, particularly with some of the Emperor's Children's stratagems. They could be pretty threatening on the charge as well, with 1 command point for a d6+6 charge, and multiple ways to boost damage. Overall, in-game they seem just like a very strong battle line type unit for Chaos. Anything that makes a unit fast, tough and dangerous all around is going to be a really solid combo, and I feel like when the model's released we'll be seeing quite a lot of them turn up in Chaos lists. I think they're perfectly viable either just in small 5-man units or big squads building anywhere up to 10. The 5-man units might not be your main damage dealers that you want to buff with loads of things. They could just be more using their speed and bullying other enemy light infantry type units and taking them off objectives, whereas the big units could go for the big combos that we've mentioned, things like a Master of Possession in support. For their competition of being a dangerous and tanky battle line of Chaos, I guess perhaps their main rivals in the Codex are the Chaos Terminators, generally having similar or better durability due to 2+ saves with Armour of Contempt, and they are core for more access to buffs and a bit of shooting. To be honest, I think there's probably room for both. The Chaos Terminators are perhaps better with some of the other cast of Chaos characters like Dark Apostles or Lords or things. They can be given some really scary stuff with the amount of core things that they can have, plus they can get the Marks of Chaos, which is handy as well. Still though, just for raw value in terms of a Master of Possessions Demonkin style buffs, I think a lot of the Chaos Terminator options are going to be hard pressed to match that for the investment. I guess Warp Talons might also be fielded in a similar role. They're also 28 point per model Demonkin with 5 attacks each. Their main advantages over the Possessed are being able to move 3 inches faster, a chance to prevent fallback, and some inbuilt deep strike. Overall though, for exactly the same points cost, I think more people are going to tend to run Possessed over Warp Talons. Toughness 5, 3 wounds, and damage 2 are all just enormous damage and defense bonuses that are going to be hard to overcome. Overall, I'd just say that Possessed are a very solid Elite's choice, perhaps the single best unit for the powerful Master of Possession buffs, and I have a feeling that we'll be seeing them used in quite a lot of Chaos competitive lists. I think we'll leave that there for the video then. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Could you see yourself using units of Possessed in a Chaos army going forward? Or are other Elite's choices looking more tempting to you? Looking forward to hearing your thoughts or how you might plan to use them down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep a fair few regular Chaos videos coming. I'm going to aim to release a fair few over the next few weeks. Finally, if you've been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.